This is a presentation on tips for reading poetry. Before we begin, you need to have an awareness of techniques used by poets. Poetry is a form of literature that relies heavily on compression. That means it conveys emotion, images, and ideas in as few of words as possible. It requires the reader to think of the poem as a puzzle that requires one to take time to reflect and connect ideas, emotions, and images together to create an understanding. It therefore requires the reader to read the poem several times to see all the hidden elements that build on one another to create the message of the poet. Some of the techniques that you might try to review are those like the simile, the metaphor, personification, hyperbole, understatement, symbol, imagery, rhyme, rhythm, alliteration, onomatopoeia, and assonance. Here are the steps to take to understand a poem. There are 12 steps suggested. Note the title, then note the speaker, identify literal portions of the poem, read aloud and note the rhythm and sound, note word choices, note figures of speech, note punctuation marks, note the pauses in the stanzas, note predominant sound, note rhyme patterns, reread the ending, and then be patient and reread several times to keep on unlocking ideas. These steps are reflected in your exercises as well. Number 1, note the title. Read the title. It often reveals the subject and sometimes the attitude toward the subject. Remember that if it doesn't make sense, it probably is suggesting something figuratively, and you'll have to read the whole poem to begin to unlock the meaning of the title. Note the speaker. Identify the speaker. It helps to unlock the message of the poem and the tone and attitude towards the idea presented within the poem. Be careful though, since the speaker or narrator is often not the same as the poet. If the poet creates a character or persona to convey one's message. Also know that in what time period the speaker is writing, because that will give you a sense of what they might be writing about, how they might be dealing with that subject matter as well, and note what topics might be current during that era that the poet has lived. Number 3, identify literal portions of the poem. Identify what portion of the poem is literal by highlighting the understood portions of the poem. The identification of the literal portions will create this base or foundation for you to interpret the things that are more difficult and which tend to be the figurative elements within the poem. Number 4, read the poem aloud. By reading the poem aloud, often you begin to understand the rhythm of the poem and whether the topic is light or heavy. Try to paraphrase the lines within the poem. Sometimes the word order within a line needs to be rearranged to help one make sense of the thought in the line. Identify word choices. Because poetry is about compression, word choice becomes very important to look at. Look at unusual choices of words. Look for any oxymoron, 2 words that contradict each other, and see what they might suggest. Puns, the play on words, the level of diction, whether it's formal, slang, jargon, or possible connotations of words. Remember, the poet is a wordsmith and is making choices about which words will create the impact wanted. Number 6, identify the figures of speech. Again, this is about compression. Identify figures of speech like the simile, the metaphor, personification, hyperbole, understatement, and see how he's compressed a whole lot of ideas into just that one figure of speech, and then try to expand or heighten and understand what that whole idea might present. Note the punctuation marks. Watch the use of punctuation. Any idea is not completed until a form of end punctuation occurs. So just because the line ends doesn't mean that the thought has ended. And unless there is a period or exclamation mark or a question mark, you will continue that thought down to the next line until you get that form of end punctuation. That might shift the idea from something that's negative into something that's positive, so it's really important to look at. Understand the presence of end punctuation underscores or emphasizes the word that comes before it. Note pauses and stanzas. Look for the pauses within the poem, which can be created by the shift down to the next line. It can be marked by a comma or a semicolon or a dash. These pauses create emphasis on previous words. And note that a shift down into a new stanza means a new idea is coming or a shift in an idea is occurring. Number 9, read the poem aloud again and identify predominant sounds. Euphonious sounds or pleasant sounds are created by the letters the L, the M, the R, the S, the soft C. Sounds that don't have to be pushed out of your mouth. They roll off your tongue, and they often suggest uplifting or pleasing ideas. On the other hand, cacophonous sounds, the harsh sounds, sounds are created by predominant use of letters of B and the hard C, the D, the G. These are sounds that have to be pushed out of your mouth, like D, G. They're harder sounds, and they suggest anger, force, discord, or disturbing ideas. Number 10, note patterns in rhyme. If the poem uses rhyme, watch for breaks in the rhyme. Poetry is all about setting down patterns, and you want to notice when breaks occur in patterns. So in I rhyme, words that look like they should rhyme but don't rhyme. Live and dive, they look like they should rhyme but they don't. Or slant rhyme, words that almost rhyme but don't quite, like cut and mat. You get the T sound, but it's a different vowel sound, so they don't quite rhyme. The breaks in rhyme suggest that something isn't what it appears to be. Number 11, reread the ending. Endings are very important in poetry. By rereading the ending, you'll often see a twist or an affirmation of an idea, and often you'll see twists, so that means a contradiction of an idea, and that means that whatever was said before is altered dramatically. And then 12, be patient with yourself. Reread poetry. Remember that the poet intentionally wants to elicit emotion and reflection in the reader, so the poet often creates puzzles that have to be unlocked to slow the reader down and to ensure the reader dwells on the ideas. This means that the poem will take several readings to fully understand the poem. Good luck with your poetry reading.